Welcome back to Business and Bourbon.
For all time's sake. As time goes by. It's been a long time. Some of the old songs. For all time's sake.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Business and Bourbon. I am here with Old Forester Rye and decided to make myself an old-fashioned today. For those of you who actually paid attention to the video and knew a little bit about making cocktails, you will notice that I also used honey rather than the normal sugar, water, whatever it is they do. I haven't learned that much about cocktails yet. I'm working on it. And I'm sure that you were saying something along the lines of honey doesn't blend into alcoholic drinks like that. Well, I learned my lesson, and it definitely did not. But I will say that it was worth the effort. I got the honey to mix in, and having a Kentucky-grown honey, we don't grow honey, whatever you call it, a Kentucky-harvested honey with a Kentucky bourbon was well worth the effort. So I've got my old-fashioned here, and today we're going to talk about freedom of speech. Such a great segue. Okay, so I want to chip in today on the conversation with Facebook. It's been going on a lot today, specifically about their ability to limit conversations around politics. I find this very interesting, and I want to chip in, even though this isn't as abstract as I normally get around to, but I feel it's important that we actually look at the parts of the conversation, and freedom of speech is one thing that they have really been hounding on, but I don't think people are actually making an argument about freedom of speech. So I'm going to do that today. So freedom of speech, first thing I want to say, is not a freedom that is granted to you by the government, right? It's not. If you read the articles of the Bill of Rights, it is a freedom that you innately have, and the government is making a promise to not take away that right from you. So freedom of speech, right to bear arms, all those things, these are rights that you as humans have an innate right to. You already have the ability to do. The government is making a promise to never remove that right from you. So to never take away your guns without cause now, or to never silence you until your use of that right infringes on someone else's. Right? So there's the crux. This is not something that the government is giving you and then receding it when they find it is beneficial or for whatever justification. That's not what's happening. You have this right, and the government is promising to not infringe on that right. And when the government does step in is when, as always, whenever your actions are infringing on someone else's rights. So it's a little abstract. Let's look at that as a metaphor. You have the right to move any way you want. You can raise your arm, you can do whatever gesture you want. When that gesture then strikes another person, you're infringing on their rights. Their right to essentially not be harmed unduly or whatever, right? You're attacking someone, you're using physical force, and you're subverting their rights. That's when the government steps in terms of physical control over your body, right? You have an innate control over your body. The government is promising not to infringe on that right until your control of your body infringes on someone else. When you murder someone, when you steal or rape someone, that's when the government comes in and says, okay, we are now taking away your right to freedom of movement or whatever. That one actually falls under pursuit of happiness, right? You can do things that serve your own happiness, but when you're seeking for your own happiness, harm someone else, that's when you've infringed on someone else's right, and that's when the government comes in with force. So that's a physical, tangible use of this. Take that entire concept, that step-by-step process and the logic behind it and the values and the regulations behind why the government would step in when it does in terms of physical force, and apply that to free speech. You have the right to move, to gesture, to say what you will to pursue your own happiness in all these ways in terms of what you're saying until that infringes on someone else. So, what does it look like to infringe on someone else? Well, a lot of examples would be if someone's speaking and you're just violently yelling over them. You're not allowing them to really talk. Now, even that's kind of a tricky area because they're still speaking. You're just preventing them from being heard. So even that's kind of a gray area. So what's more likely to happen is that your other actions will prevent their speech. Right? So someone can like physically shut you up, and that's an infringement on your rights. But when is free speech an infringement on someone else's? There's a lot of arguments these days about essentially stress. Right? If I say something that stresses you out, they're trying to conflate that with physical harm. And I see the logic there because stress produces chemicals in your brain and through your body and all these things that can be considered physically damaging. However, there is a sense of agency from the person who's receiving a message, right? If I say something that offends you, you have a sense of agency. There is a choice to let it get to you, let it get under your skin, or to ignore it. And I am saying this as a millennial. You can ignore something that you don't like, and you can dismiss it because you don't agree with it, right? Or you could engage with it, or you can let it get you upset. What you can't do is you can't say that person can't speak anymore. So that's where the freedom of speech law happens, right? Okay, so what does this have to do with Facebook? So Facebook is being asked to filter out political commentary, right? Now I say that's the I guess the conservative way to say it. I'm not, honestly, these days I'm not sure which side is on which side of the argument because they're all conflated. But they are being accused of filtering out people who have a conservative voice, and then at the same time they're being asked to filter out people who are doing essentially hate speech and things like that under the guise of free speech. Now the problem with that is Facebook is a platform, or at least they try to be. Facebook is trying to be a general platform that allows people to speak. They're the town square, they're the town hall that will allow someone to come in, right? So Facebook's faced with a problem right now of, do we allow people to come into my square and holler nonsense and holler lies, holler things that are fake, or do we filter them out? The problem is if you filter them out, they are now taking a certain level of responsibility for what is being said. Not the least of which is they're taking responsibility for what is accurate, and that's dangerous. I'm a full-fledged capitalist. I believe in a free market and a small government and all those things, and I really hesitate to ask a company, especially a tech company like Facebook, to be the arbiter of what is real and what is fake. That's scary. I mean, I talk about a tyranny of the government all the time, but that truly is the tyranny of essentially bourgeoisie or a capitalist tyranny. I'm not sure what the actual term there is. That's not what they should be doing. Or, take that to the flip side. Let them do that, but they should do that completely. They will have their agenda, things they believe in, and that's not bad. They have a core value as a company, things that they want to things they believe in, things they want to support, things they don't want to support. Companies should have core values like that. But the difference here is that they're not a platform anymore. They're not an area where everyone can come and communicate. They are an area where people who essentially agree with them can come and communicate. The beauty of that is if you remove them as the platform, or if they remove themselves as the platform and they pronounce themselves as an area for a specific type of thought or a type of value structure, great. Then you're going to have someone else come up with a competing value structure. And essentially what you're going to have is you're going to have liberals and conservatives on different social media, kind of like we have Fox News and MSNBC. And yes, there are problems with the two different networks like that, and there are constraints, but they're also, in the same way, both of them are parading themselves, both news networks and social media are parading themselves as heralds of unbiased opinion. Facebook in the way that we don't filter everything, news channels in the way that we filter everything and only get facts, right? And both of them are lying. They both have agendas. The news networks definitely have agendas. I think at least Fox News and NBC have admitted to having agendas. But CNN has an agenda. NPR has a major agenda. They're not unbiased anymore. It's very rare you'll find a news network that's unbiased. Facebook is unbiased, but is biased, but they were trying to maintain a level of unbiased, but they are being pushed hard. Essentially, from what I can tell, they're being pushed by the left to create a bias. Now they're being asked to create a bias on what is accurate, and that sounds good. But as soon as they allow their bias to come into their code, essentially, they're creating a tangible difference in the way that their company works by creating a code and filtering out people's access to that platform. Let's remember, free speech is a right. Access to a platform is not an innate right, right? There's a difference there. So they can justifiably remove people from their platform. They just can't claim to be an unbiased platform while doing that. So they have two options here. I believe, looking at them business-wise, because this is business in Bourbon here, I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to calm the frustrations with the 2016 elections about the Russian integration, or not integration, the Russian hacking, or whatever, all that stuff, right? They're trying to say, okay, we recognize that people used our platform for this problem, while at the same time, they're trying to not remove themselves as a platform. Because think of who their market is, right? They're a social media company. They're a tech company, which means they really, really rely on younger generations because that's who really focuses on tech. The interesting thing is Facebook is no longer the primary platform for younger generations. So what will happen if they start being biased, right? They would have a choice to either go liberal, and they're part of the I can't think of the word now. That whole area with all the different tech companies, Silicon Valley, right? So they're very much in Silicon Valley. They're a pretty liberal company in general, just by nature of being in that area and all the osmosis of culture. So they could go liberal, but if they go hardcore liberal, their primary customer is actually 40 and up. So they're going to lose their primary customers by having that. And that's not something they want to do. At the same token, if they go conservative, which is going to be primarily the older generations like that, they're going to keep their primary customer, but then they're going to lose the validation from younger generations. And I guarantee you, as soon as they lose that competitive edge in the younger generations, even though that's not their primary market anymore, those younger generations, as soon as they dismiss Facebook, Facebook's going to crash. Because younger generation is going to go, and there's so many out there, right? Anyone who says that Facebook has a monopoly has no idea about how social media works. So you got not only Twitter and MySpace is making a comeback, which is weird to me, but you got TikTok. They bought Instagram, which is good. Snapchat and all these other things. Snapchat could have made it bigger, right? So imagine Snapchat coming up and they started getting big and they started faltering. What if Facebook pissed off all the younger generations and then they all chose to go to Snapchat? Snapchat would dominate Facebook in a night. They would just, overnight, they would just kill Facebook. So Facebook's now trying to decide which customer they want to go with. Do they want to stick with the people who are the cutting edge younger generation and please them? Or do they want to please the older generation as their actual monetary base? Well, that's a lose-lose situation. So they have to find a way to try and keep both. And what they're doing is they're maintaining this open platform so that anyone can come. And yes, it's going to have some crazy conservatives. It's going to have some crazy liberals. Let's be honest. There's a lot of crazy liberals out there too, posting stuff all over Facebook that's just as inaccurate. But they're going to start creating these policies. Now, if you look at the policies that they're having, this is what I heard this morning, their policy has very little to do with filtering out an opinion, which is great. Their policy also has very little to do with filtering out false facts, or it's a contradiction term, false information, right? So that's what the liberals are asking, and they finally created something, but it doesn't do what people are wanting it to do. What they did, what they're being asked is they're being asked to eliminate false information and become an arbiter of accurate news. And they basically said, no, we're not going to do that. And in fact, we're going to maintain our free speech. But what we will do is we'll give you an option to turn off essentially election information. And it's not even so much a detailed format, right? They're not saying, I don't want to hear from Pete Buttigieg. They're not saying, I don't want to hear from Trump or Trump supporters. They're saying, I don't want to hear about the election. So that's a major unbiased way to remove that problem. So if you don't want to be misled, you can remove yourself from the whole situation. But at the same time, Facebook's not taking an ownership of accuracy of data. And they shouldn't, because they're a platform. That's not what they're about. They're not a news channel. So that, I think, is brilliant in the way that they did that, because they finally created something. So people who don't actually know how code works say, oh, they created something, but then they're never actually going to turn it off. The other thing that they had done was, crap, they made 2 policies, and I forgot the second one now because talking. I should take notes. That's a good idea. The bourbon helps with this whole remembering things. If you don't know, I do these videos and I make the glass, and every time I mess up is really when I have some bourbon, and then I try it again, and I have some bourbon, and I try it again. Yeah, but that's, so I do want to at least end there, because Facebook has created a policy that does not infringe on free speech, because anyone on that platform can say, I don't want to listen to this person. What they can't do is to say, I don't want to listen to a conservative idea. And that's good, because it is very dangerous for them to implement any type of coding that filters out conservative or filters out a liberal idea. Because then Facebook is taking a play, they're leveraging their major platform as a way to filter what access you as a consumer get, or you're not even a consumer, you as a user. They're filtering out what information you get without taking responsibility of the accuracy of that data. That's what would have happened. So they avoided that by saying you get all of it or you get none of it, and you have that choice, which is great, because you have that choice, and that's what should happen. So hopefully that was intelligible, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.